You know, there's something about a cold bottle of Coca-Cola on a summer day that most of us take for granted. But imagine, just for a moment, that you'd never tasted one before, never even heard of it. And then picture yourself, a prisoner of war, thousands of miles from home, expecting the worst, and someone hands you that bottle for 5 cents. That moment, that single moment, changed everything for hundreds of thousands of German soldiers during World War II. Now, before we get into this, grab yourself something to drink, maybe some popcorn, settle back. Because what I'm about to share with you, it's going to take a while, and trust me, you'll want to hear every bit of it. This story, it's not what you'd expect about prison camps and war. Not at all. And hey, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this, they need to be remembered. So let me take you back. Summer of 1943, Tennessee. A German soldier stood in line at a canteen staring at shelves he couldn't quite believe were real. For 2 years, he'd fought across North Africa, surviving on stale bread, ersatz coffee that wasn't really coffee at all, and whatever rations the supply lines could manage to deliver, which, more often than not, wasn't much. And now he was looking at candy bars, rows of them, Coca-Cola in glass bottles beading with condensation, ice cream, actual ice cream. The guard told him everything cost about the same as what American kids paid with their allowance money. A nickel here, a dime there. The soldier earned 80 cents that day for his work detail. He could buy more than he'd seen in months back home. This wasn't supposed to happen. According to everything he'd been told, America was weak. Decadent, yes, but weak. Running out of resources, barely holding on. The evidence in his hands told a different story entirely. See, what happened in American prison camps between 1943 and 1946, it wasn't part of any grand strategy. Nobody sat down and said, "Let's defeat Nazi ideology with ice cream." But that's exactly what happened. Over 371,000 German prisoners of war came to America during those years, and they encountered something that shattered every single thing they'd been taught. They encountered abundance. Real, overwhelming, casual abundance. The kind where you could throw away half a Coca-Cola because you were full. The kind where candy bars sat in bowls, free for the taking. The kind where mess halls served ice cream on a regular Tuesday, not as some special occasion, just because it was hot outside. And this abundance, this impossible plenty in the middle of a global war, it did something that bullets and bombs couldn't do. It changed minds. Completely. Irrevocably. Let me walk you through how this happened, because the details, the small moments, they matter. It started in North Africa, May 1943. The Afrika Korps, Rommel's elite desert fighters, they surrendered. About 250,000 German and Italian soldiers laid down their weapons in Tunisia. These were hardened veterans, men who'd pushed the British all the way back to Egypt. They expected what they'd been told to expect: brutality, starvation, revenge. Instead, within hours, and I mean hours of surrendering, American soldiers handed them K-rations. Now, American GIs complained about K-rations constantly, called them barely edible, griped about them in every letter home. But to German soldiers who'd been surviving on minimal rations for months, these emergency field meals were feasts. Inside each K-ration box, crackers, cheese that came in a tin, candy, fruit bars, instant coffee, sugar tablets, cigarettes, things that had disappeared from German military supplies years earlier. One German officer, he later told the Red Cross, he said, "We expected to be starved. That's what prisoners deserve. Instead, the Americans fed us better than our own army had in months. We don't understand. We thought maybe it was a trick, some kind of psychological warfare before the real treatment began. But the real treatment? It was more of the same. At the processing camps in North Africa, before the ships even arrived, American mess halls served pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, milk, real milk, not the powdered substitute German soldiers had grown accustomed to. The confusion started right there. This wasn't how you treated enemies. This wasn't how war worked, at least not the war they'd been fighting. Then came the voyage across the Atlantic, the Liberty ships. You've probably heard of Liberty ships if you're interested in World War II history. Absolutely remarkable vessels, mass-produced at a rate that still seems impossible today. At peak production, American shipyards completed one Liberty ship every 42 hours. Every 42 hours. These ships carried up to 30,000 prisoners monthly across the Atlantic to the United States. And the German soldiers aboard them? They received rations that matched what the crew ate, around 3,500 calories daily, fresh bread, meat, vegetables, coffee with actual sugar and milk. The ships had refrigeration systems, standard equipment on American vessels, kept food fresh for the entire 2-week crossing. But here's the part that really drove the point home. On some of these crossings, they served ice cream. I want you to think about that for a second. Ice cream. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, on a ship transporting prisoners of war. One ship's log, the USS General M.B. Stewart, from July 1943, it records serving ice cream to prisoners on the 4th of July. They had an ice cream maker on board that could produce 10 gallons per batch. And they used it for prisoners. For men who hadn't seen ice cream since before the war started, who might not have had much ice cream even before that. This frozen dessert in the middle of the ocean, it was like something from a dream or a lie. Except it was real, cold and sweet and absolutely real. When the ships docked at American ports, Norfolk, Newport News, the education continued. The Norfolk Naval Base covered 4,300 acres. German prisoners watched as this single facility handled more cargo in one day than major German ports managed in a week. The scale of everything, it was difficult to process. Near the docks there were shops, exchanges for the dock workers. And in these shops, candy bars. Not hidden behind counters, not rationed out carefully, just there, on shelves. Hershey bars, Mars bars, Nestle products, dozens of varieties, all for 5 cents each, the same price charged everywhere across America. Some prisoners were put on trains for the journey inland, and these weren't cattle cars, like they might have expected, passenger coaches, with dining cars that served full meals, fried chicken, vegetables, pie, coffee. One prisoner later wrote in his diary, "They serve us like passengers, not prisoners. I keep waiting for the deception to end, for someone to laugh and take it all away. But meal after meal, it continues." The prison camps themselves, spread across America, they were something else entirely. Take Camp Crossville in Tennessee. Pretty typical of the larger facilities. Electric lights in every barracks, hot water, flush toilets, heat in the winter. These weren't luxuries. They were standard. But the camp exchanges, that's where things got interesting. The PX stores, they called them, and they stocked everything. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, multiple brands of soft drinks, candy bars of every type, ice cream where they had the refrigeration for it, cigarettes, tobacco, fresh fruit, even beer, the weak 3.2% kind, but still beer. Prisoners earned money for their work. Started at 80 cents a day, later raised to $1. And with candy bars at 5 cents, Coca-Cola at 5 cents, a single day's wages could buy 16 of these items. 16 candy bars, or 16 Cokes, or any combination from one day's work. Back in Germany, these products, if you could find them at all, you needed connections, special privileges. They weren't things ordinary people could just buy. Here, anyone could walk into the PX and buy them. Guards, prisoners, didn't matter. Coca-Cola, it became something more than just a drink. The Coca-Cola Company, during 1943 alone, produced 5 billion bottles. 5 billion! They had a contract with the military guaranteeing that every American serviceman anywhere in the world could get Coca-Cola for 5 cents. The logistics of that, it's staggering when you think about it. And German prisoners noticed. They noticed that this soft drink, which most of them had never heard of before capture, was everywhere. Every camp received regular deliveries. When they went on work details, they saw vending machines at gas stations, factories, schools. Americans drank it constantly. Kids, adults, it didn't matter. And they'd throw away half-empty bottles without thinking about it. But what really impressed the technically minded prisoners, the engineers, the officers, was the standardization. Coca-Cola tasted identical whether you drank it in Maine or Texas. Every bottle exactly the same. The quality control required for that, the distribution coordination, it exceeded anything German industry had achieved even in peacetime. The syrup was manufactured in Atlanta, shipped to bottling plants nationwide. Each plant produced millions of bottles following exact specifications. And somehow, impossibly, it all worked perfectly every time. Records show that some prison camps received 200 to 300 cases of Coca-Cola weekly. That's roughly 5,000 to 7,000 bottles every week for prisoners. Camp Hearn in Texas consumed about 7,000 bottles weekly during summer. Just one camp. The prisoners did the math. They couldn't help it. This single beverage, produced in quantities that exceeded entire sectors of German production, given away for 5 cents to everyone, including enemies. Ice cream deserves its own chapter in this story because ice cream, it seemed like an impossibility. Most German prisoners hadn't seen ice cream since before the war started. It had disappeared from German life early on. Resources needed elsewhere. Milk, sugar, cream, all rationed severely. But in America, Army records confirm ice cream was served regularly in camps with adequate refrigeration. During summer months, it showed up on menus like it was nothing special. The military considered ice cream essential for morale. So essential that they built specialized ice cream ships for the Pacific Fleet, floating ice cream factories in the middle of a war. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, the 4th of July celebration included ice cream made on site. Prisoners watched as guards used hand-cranked freezers, adding ice, salt, cream, sugar, flavorings, making gallons of ice cream for a party in July. The casual use of resources that were precious back home, ice in summer, cream, sugar, just for entertainment, for enjoyment. It was incomprehensible. By 1944, many camps had electric ice cream makers, more efficient, could produce more, and the variety available, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, butter pecan, it exceeded what German ice cream parlors offered before the war, in peacetime, when things were good. Prisoners could purchase ice cream bars for 10 cents, ice cream sandwiches, cups of different flavors. Army records show larger camps ordered 50 to 100 gallons of ice cream weekly during summer. Think about that. 50 to 100 gallons weekly for prisoners of war. One prisoner, interviewed years later, said, "The first time they served ice cream, I thought someone had made a mistake, that it was meant for the guards, and they'd given it to us by accident. I ate it quickly before anyone could take it back. But they didn't take it back. And the next week, More ice cream. I stopped waiting for the mistake to be corrected. This was simply how things were in America. Sugar tells its own story, a sweet story, if you'll pardon the expression. In Germany, sugar was strictly rationed. Civilians received 280 grams monthly when it was available, which often it wasn't. In American prison camps, sugar sat in bowls on mess hall tables. White, refined sugar, unlimited. Use as much as you wanted. Quartermaster records show camps receiving 100-pound bags of sugar weekly. The camp bakeries used sugar liberally. Cakes, cookies, pies appeared on menus regularly. Not special occasions, regular rotation. Coffee, tea, cereals, desserts, all sweetened without restriction. There was an incident at Camp Aliceville, Alabama in August 1943. Humid weather caused several 100 pounds of sugar to harden, made it difficult to use. And you know what the kitchen staff did? They threw it away. Just discarded it. Ordered replacement supplies. The German prisoners working in that kitchen, they were reportedly distressed by this waste. Several 100 pounds of sugar, which could have been recovered with some steam and effort, simply thrown away, as if it were nothing. Because in America, it was nothing. Sugar was abundant. Time spent recovering hardened sugar was time wasted. Easier and cheaper to just order more. This casual approach to resources, this mathematical logic of abundance, it challenged everything the prisoners understood about how economies worked. Chocolate was another revelation. The major manufacturers, Hershey, Mars, Nestle, they produced millions of chocolate bars monthly despite wartime restrictions. The military alone purchased 380 million pounds of chocolate products during the war years. Prison camp exchanges stocked multiple varieties. Standard Hershey bars, ration chocolate bars, candy bars with chocolate coating, all available for 5 to 10 cents. And prisoners discovered Americans had preferences. They'd choose one brand over another, casually, based on personal taste. Not because one was available and the other wasn't. Not because you needed connections to get the good kind. Just preference, like choosing between equally abundant options. Every month, the Red Cross distributed packages to prisoners. Standard parcels contained chocolate bars among other items, coffee, cheese, crackers, canned meat, cigarettes, and soap. These packages supplemented regular rations. They provided luxury items that exceeded what German civilians received as basic rations back home. Prisoners began to understand something fundamental. Their families in Germany were hungry. They, the prisoners, the defeated enemies, were well fed, better fed than the victors in Germany. This inversion of expectations, this complete reversal of what should be happening, it ate away at Nazi ideology more effectively than any propaganda program could have. Thanksgiving 1943 introduced German prisoners to a purely American celebration. And the meal, well, it demonstrated something important. Every prison camp across America served traditional Thanksgiving dinner: roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes with gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, multiple vegetables, pumpkin pie, coffee, and milk. The logistics required to provide turkey dinners to 425,000 prisoners of war, plus millions of American servicemen worldwide, the organizational capacity necessary for that, it was staggering. But what really struck the prisoners was that they received the same meal as American soldiers, the exact same. No difference in quality or quantity. This equality of treatment, this insistence on feeding enemies the same as your own troops, it contradicted Nazi racial hierarchy at its foundation. Some prisoners cried during that meal, not from sadness, but from confusion, from the collapse of everything they'd been taught about strength and weakness, about who deserved what. Christmas 1943 brought something even more unexpected: generosity from American civilians. Church groups, civic organizations, individual Americans sent packages to German prisoners. The American Friends Service Committee alone distributed 50,000 Christmas packages to enemy prisoners. Homemade cookies, candy, toiletries, games and books, cigarettes, writing materials. In Tonkawa, Oklahoma, townspeople delivered homemade treats to the German prisoners at Camp Tonkawa. In Hearne, Texas, church groups brought Christmas cookies and candy. This civilian kindness toward enemies, toward men whose countrymen were killing American soldiers, it challenged everything. These Americans had family members fighting against Germany, sons, brothers, husbands in combat, and still they showed charity to German prisoners, demonstrating strength through mercy rather than vengeance, power through generosity rather than cruelty. One prisoner wrote home, in a letter censored but preserved, "I don't understand these people. Their sons fight us, and they send us cookies. What kind of enemy does this? What kind of strength can afford to be kind?" As the war continued, labor shortages intensified. By 1944, about 100,000 German prisoners worked outside the camps, in agriculture, in food processing, witnessing American food production firsthand. This is where the education became visceral. In Michigan orchards, prisoners picked cherries, thousands of pounds of cherries destined for maraschino production, those bright red garnishes that topped ice cream sundaes. The volume staggered them. Single orchards producing tons of fruit for decoration, for garnishes, not for nutrition, not for survival, for aesthetic pleasure. At canneries, the prisoners observed quality control that rejected perfectly edible food. Del Monte records from 1944 show about 15% of fruit was rejected for minor imperfections, slightly wrong size, small blemishes, still perfectly edible. What happened to this rejected food? Fed to animals or composted? In Germany, that fruit would have been treasured. Here, animal feed. Sugar beet processing in Colorado and Nebraska revealed agricultural mechanization beyond anything Germany had achieved. Single American farms produced more sugar beets than entire German regions. The prisoners learned American sugar production from both cane and beets reached 7 million tons annually. 7 million tons! That explained the casual abundance, the sugar in bowls on mess hall tables, the sweetened everything, the cookies and cakes and pies. Not because Americans were better people, because American production was on a scale that made abundance inevitable. Some prisoners, those in minimum security, occasionally ate at American diners under guard supervision. And these small restaurants, they offered menus that would grace elite German establishments, available to anyone with modest funds. Documented prices for 1944: hamburger, 25 cents, Coca-Cola, 5 cents, slice of pie, 15 cents, ice cream sundae, 25 cents, full dinner special, 65 to 75 cents. But it wasn't just the prices, it was the equality of service. A factory worker and a bank president sat at adjacent counter stools, served by the same waitress, offered the same menu, charged the same prices, ate identical meals. No special sections for important people, no separate menus for those with connections. Everyone equal in access to abundance. This democratic plenty, this assumption that ordinary people deserved good food, it contradicted everything about German social stratification, everything about the hierarchy the prisoners had been raised to believe was natural and necessary. As prisoners gained access to American publications, magazines, newspapers, they discovered production statistics, numbers that dwarfed German efforts. American production in 1944, sugar, approximately 7 million tons, chocolate and cocoa products, 380 million pounds to military alone. Coca-Cola, 5 billion bottles in 1943. Ice cream, over 500 million gallons. Milk, 119 billion pounds. German production, same period. Sugar, heavily rationed, primarily from beets. Chocolate, military priority only, limited. Soft drinks, minimal production. Ice cream, virtually non-existent. Milk, severely rationed. These numbers were published openly. In magazines Americans bought at newsstands for a dime. Information Germany would have classified as state secrets. Americans printed it for anyone to read. And the comparison was devastating. America's wartime production exceeded Germany's peacetime peaks, not slightly, exponentially. The prisoners did the calculations. They were Germans, after all. Precision and mathematics were cultural touchstones, and the math was undeniable. By late 1944, something remarkable happened. German prisoners started sending food packages to Germany. Read that again. Let it sink in. Prisoners of war, using their camp wages, purchased American products to mail home to their families in Germany. Chocolate bars, instant coffee, canned goods. The Red Cross confirmed this reversal. German prisoners in America sent approximately 11 million parcels to Germany during their captivity. Most contained food items. Imagine receiving a package from your husband, your son, your brother, who's imprisoned in enemy territory. And in that package, food, chocolate, coffee, things you haven't seen in years, while you, in freedom, in victory supposedly, face starvation. The impact on German families receiving American abundance from imprisoned relatives while they faced hunger in freedom, it profoundly undermined Nazi ideology, more effectively than any propaganda program ever could have. The promises of Nazi superiority, of Germany's rightful dominance, how do those promises hold up when your imprisoned husband in enemy territory has more food to send you than your victorious government can provide? Even American rationing revealed the gulf between the societies. Yes, America had rationing: sugar, meat, butter, other items. Americans complained about it constantly, felt it was a terrible hardship. But American sugar rationing provided 2 pounds monthly per person, more than triple the German allowance when Germans could get sugar at all. American meat rationing was 28 ounces weekly per person. Germans received that much, if lucky, monthly. Even rationed, even suffering through wartime restrictions, Americans maintained consumption levels Germans considered impossible luxury. Office of Price Administration records show Americans purchased 74 pounds of sugar per person annually in 1944, despite rationing, despite a global war. That's 10 times German consumption, 10 times. The prisoners absorbed these facts, these uncomfortable, undeniable facts, and slowly, inevitably, their worldview crumbled. Beyond Coca-Cola, prisoners discovered America's entire soft drink industry. Pepsi-Cola, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Orange Crush, regional brands they'd never heard of. Multiple companies producing similar products, competing nationwide. The variety itself demonstrated market abundance impossible under German-controlled economy. In Germany, scarcity meant centralization. Limited production meant limited options. In America, abundance meant competition. Multiple companies could all succeed because the market was large enough, wealthy enough to support them all. Bottling plants operated in every major city. The technology, carbonation, bottling, capping, labeling, standardized and efficient. Single plants produced millions of bottles annually. The distribution network reached every small town, every gas station, every grocery store. You could buy a cold Coca-Cola in the remotest corner of Montana. Same price, same taste, same availability. American soft drink production reached billions of bottles annually by war's end. Dozens of bottles per American citizen yearly. This single industry's output, one category of beverage, exceeded entire sectors of German consumer production. Spring 1945 brought the ultimate blow, the ultimate collapse of any remaining Nazi ideology. As American forces advanced through Germany, liberating territories, they filmed everything. Newsreels captured GIs distributing chocolate and gum to German children. And the prisoners in American camps, they watched these newsreels, saw their own children's faces, or faces like their children's faces, lighting up with joy at receiving American candy. Candy their own government couldn't provide. Candy they'd been eating regularly for years now in American prison camps. The contrast was stark, brutal, undeniable. American soldiers advancing through enemy territory carried enough candy to give away, to hand out freely to enemy children, while the German state, which had promised triumph and prosperity, delivered starvation. Films of concentration camp liberations showed American troops sharing rations with skeletal survivors, demonstrating humanity toward victims of the regime these German soldiers had served. Some prisoners broke down watching these films, the cognitive dissonance too great to bear. Everything they'd believed, everything they'd fought for, it was built on lies. Lies about strength, about superiority, about who deserved what. And the truth was written in chocolate bars and Coca-Cola bottles, in ice cream sundaes and sugar bowls, in the casual, overwhelming abundance that America could afford to share with enemies. Between 1945 and 1946, the German prisoners returned home, back to a destroyed homeland, back to families who had suffered, while they, in captivity, had been well fed. Many prisoners had gained weight in American captivity, significant weight. Good nutrition, regular meals, enough calories. They returned healthier than when they'd been captured. Their families? Weakened by starvation, malnourished, struggling to survive. Medical examinations documented this. Prisoners returning to Germany were generally in good health, better health than the German population they returned to. This physical evidence of American plenty versus German deprivation was undeniable. You couldn't argue with weight gain, with healthy bodies and clear eyes and strong muscles. Many prisoners brought final Red Cross packages home. Chocolate, coffee, canned goods. These items became family treasures, hoarded carefully, shared on special occasions. Children who had forgotten what chocolate tasted like, or never knew, received Hershey bars from fathers who had eaten ice cream regularly in prison camps. The stories these men told seemed like fantasies, seemed impossible. But the chocolate in their children's hands proved the stories were real. Unexpectedly, many former prisoners became advocates for the Marshall Plan, America's plan to rebuild Europe, including Germany. When other Germans expressed suspicion, when they questioned American motives, these former prisoners spoke up. They had witnessed American abundance firsthand. They understood it wasn't zero-sum. American prosperity didn't require German poverty. American strength didn't demand German weakness. The American system created wealth through production, not through conquest. They had seen a society wealthy enough to waste food while fighting a global war on multiple continents, wealthy enough to feed enemies, to give ice cream to prisoners. That kind of society could afford to help rebuild former enemies, because that's how abundance works. It grows, it spreads, it multiplies. This mental model, creation rather than conquest, production rather than extraction, it shaped West Germany's economic approach in the post-war years. The German economic miracle of the 1950s, the Wirtschaftswunder. It was partially built on knowledge gained in American prison camps. Former prisoners who had witnessed American production methods, distribution systems, consumer abundance, they applied these lessons to German reconstruction. They'd learned that mass production could make luxuries affordable, that standardization enabled both quality and efficiency, that consumer abundance created political stability, that industrial democracy could outproduce authoritarian control. These lessons, learned through Coca-Cola and ice cream, through candy bars and chewing gum, shaped a generation of German business and political leaders. They built a new Germany based on abundance rather than scarcity, on production rather than conquest, on democratic markets rather than controlled economies. And it worked spectacularly. By the late 1950s, West Germany had one of the strongest economies in Europe. Germans could buy Coca-Cola, could eat ice cream, could purchase chocolate bars without special connections. The abundance that seemed impossible in American prison camps became ordinary in rebuilt Germany. The transformation of German prisoners through American food abundance is documented extensively. Military quartermaster records, International Red Cross reports, corporate production records, particularly from Coca-Cola's archives, prisoner correspondence, censored but preserved, post-war interviews and memoirs, academic studies. Arnold Kramer, the leading historian of German prisoners of war in America, spent decades researching the subject. His conclusion? Food abundance was central to ideological transformation. Casual American plenty accomplished what formal re-education programs couldn't. Complete demolition of Nazi superiority myths. Total collapse of the worldview that had supported German aggression. Not through argument, not through propaganda, through chocolate bars and ice cream, through sugar bowls and Coca-Cola, through the undeniable physical reality of abundance. Let me give you the statistical summary, because numbers, hard data, they tell an irrefutable story. Average prisoner consumption, 1943 to 1946. Daily calories, 3,300 to 3,600. Sugar, 4 pounds monthly available. Meat, 32 ounces weekly available. Milk, 1 quart daily available. Ice cream served regularly during summer. Soft drinks unlimited at 5 cents each. German civilian rations, same period. Daily calories, 1,200 to 1,500 calories. Sugar, 280 grams monthly when available. Meat, 10.5 ounces weekly, often unavailable. Milk, severely rationed. Ice cream, non-existent. Soft drinks, none available. These disparities weren't propaganda. They were documented reality. Enemy prisoners ate better than German civilians. Prisoners ate better than the families they'd left behind. This proved beyond any argument that American abundance extended even to defeated foes, that American productive capacity was so vast it could feed enemies while fighting a global war on multiple continents. The prisoner experience with American food culture influenced post-war Germany profoundly and permanently. Coca-Cola returned to West Germany in 1949, became a symbol of American alliance, of the Western choice versus Soviet control. Ice cream parlors appeared in German cities, modeled on American soda fountains, serving sundaes and sodas, creating gathering places for young people. Candy bars and chewing gum became symbols of recovery, of normalcy returning, of abundance replacing scarcity. Former prisoners often became importers of American food products. They understood the appeal from personal experience, knew these products represented more than just taste. They symbolized abundance, democracy, modernity, everything Germany needed to become. The introduction of supermarkets to Germany in the 1950s was championed by former prisoners. They'd witnessed American grocery stores, understood that democratic abundance required new distribution methods, not just production increases. Traditional German shopping, specialized stores for each product type, it couldn't deliver American-style abundance. You needed different infrastructure, different logistics. Former prisoners pushed for these changes based on what they'd seen in America. In various post-war interviews and memoirs, German prisoners consistently identified food abundance as transformative, more transformative than re-education programs, more powerful than propaganda. A former Afrika Korps officer, interviewed in 1975, stated, "We expected to defeat a weak, divided America. Instead, we found a nation that could give ice cream to enemies. That's when we knew we had lost more than a war. We had lost our entire worldview." Another veteran, interviewed for a documentary in 1985, recalled, "My first Coca-Cola was like drinking the future. It was sweet, fizzing, completely unnecessary, and available to anyone for a nickel. That drink contained everything Nazi Germany wasn't: abundant, democratic, joyful." These testimonies, collected across decades, confirmed that American food abundance achieved what military defeat couldn't: complete ideological transformation. The men who arrived as Nazi warriors left as witnesses to democratic prosperity, carrying that witness back to Germany, spreading it to families, friends, communities. Historians recognize the German prisoner experience in America as remarkably successful. Re-education through abundance rather than propaganda, through observation rather than instruction. The program succeeded because prisoners saw American society functioning at peak productivity while treating enemies with dignity, while sharing abundance with those who had fought against them. The food aspect was crucial because it was universal. Everyone understands hunger and satisfaction. Everyone responds to the physical reality of nourishment. And the lessons were undeniable. Weight gain and health improvement were visible. 3 meals daily plus canteen purchases were continuous. Comparative, the prisoners knew German deprivation intimately. Every meal became a lesson in American industrial capacity. Every Coca-Cola demonstrated standardization and distribution. Every ice cream sundae showed that abundance could be democratic, available to anyone, including enemies. Children of former prisoners of war grew up hearing stories about American abundance in prison camps. These stories initially seemed fantastic, exaggerated. Surely ice cream wasn't that common. Surely Coca-Cola wasn't that cheap. But as West Germany recovered, as American products became available, the stories were validated. Everything their fathers had told them was true. The mythology of American plenty, born in prison camps, shaped generations of German-American relations. Many of children of former prisoners later studied in America, worked in America, drawn by their fathers' stories of impossible abundance. And they found the reality matched the tales. Supermarkets stocked with variety, soda fountains serving sundaes, candy aisles offering dozens of choices. The dream was real, had always been real. This multi-generational impact extended beyond individuals to shape cultures and systems. West German business culture absorbed lessons about consumer abundance, about quality standardization, about democratic markets where ordinary people had purchasing power. The economic miracle wasn't just about production, it was about creating abundance for ordinary citizens, making luxuries affordable, giving everyone access to quality of life. These principles, learned by observing American abundance, they rebuilt Germany into something new, something better than what had been destroyed. Today, McDonald's operates over 1,400 restaurants in Germany. Coca-Cola is ubiquitous. Ice cream is ordinary. The transformation from scarcity to abundance initiated in American prison camps is complete. German children don't know what it's like to lack chocolate, to never taste ice cream, to wonder if Coca-Cola is real or propaganda. They live in abundance, democratic abundance, the kind where anyone can walk into a store and buy what they want. Yet the historical lesson remains powerful, important, worth remembering. Ideological transformation through abundance rather than deprivation, kindness rather than cruelty, demonstration rather than propaganda. The German prisoners who couldn't believe ice cream and Coca-Cola in American prison camps, they witnessed democracy's ultimate weapon, the ability to create such abundance that it could be casually shared with enemies. This story represents history's most unusual victory, a war won through generosity, an ideology defeated by ice cream, a worldview shattered by soft drinks. These men experienced transformation not through punishment, but through plenty, not through revenge, but through routine abundance. They arrived believing in German superiority and American weakness. They left understanding that American strength came from productive capacity so vast it could waste resources without concern. The society that could give Coca-Cola to prisoners for 5 cents possessed power beyond military might, power that built rather than destroyed, power that created rather than conquered. The ice cream sundae, with its layers of excess, became a metaphor. Ice cream, syrup, whipped cream, nuts, cherry. Each component alone exceeded German dreams. Combined, they represented impossible luxury made routine. That enemies could order seconds, could eat until satisfied, while German children faced hunger, revealed the totality of Nazi failure. Former prisoners often recalled specific moments of revelation, sensory memories that carried more power than any argument. The first Coca-Cola's fizz against the tongue, the cold sweetness, the carbonation that made their eyes water. The first spoonful of ice cream, that shock of cold, the creaminess, the sweetness, a taste so rich it seemed impossible to eat more than a few bites, and then discovering you could have as much as you wanted. The first bite of a Hershey bar, chocolate that melted on the tongue, smooth and sweet, available for a nickel, anytime, every day if you wanted. These sensory memories carried more weight than statistics, more impact than lectures, more power than any re-education program could muster. They had tasted democracy, and it was sweet. One prisoner, writing in his diary decades later, recalled, "I remember standing in the PX line, holding my nickel, thinking about my daughter. She was 7 when I left for the war. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. And I was about to buy my 3rd Coca-Cola of the week because I could, because it cost almost nothing, because there was no limit. And I thought, my daughter has probably never tasted this, might never taste it. And here I am, a prisoner, drinking it like water." That's when I understood we had lost more than territory. We had lost the future. Another veteran remembered his first ice cream sundae with painful clarity. They put 3 scoops in the dish, 3! Then hot fudge, thick and dark, whipped cream from a canister just piled on top, chopped peanuts, a bright red cherry. The guard said it cost $0.25. I had $0.25, but I hesitated. Surely this was meant for officers, for special occasions. He laughed not unkindly and said, "It's Wednesday, and you have $0.25. That's special enough." Wednesday, just Wednesday, and I could eat something that would have been unimaginable luxury back home. These moments of revelation, repeated thousands of times across hundreds of camps, they accumulated, built into understanding, hardened into conviction. The transformation was complete and irrevocable. The men who had marched for the Third Reich, who had believed in German destiny, in Aryan superiority, in the necessity of conquest, they returned home as something different. Apostles of abundance, witnesses to a different way, carriers of a revolutionary message. They had learned that prosperity came from freedom, not conquest. That strength came from production, not extraction. That abundance was possible through democracy, not dictatorship. They had learned that America's secret weapon wasn't the atomic bomb, though that was terrifying enough. It wasn't superior numbers, though those mattered. It was the ability to give ice cream to enemies. The capacity to produce such overwhelming abundance that feeding prisoners better than your own civilians fed themselves during peacetime was routine, expected, automatic. This was power of a different order. Power that didn't need to threaten or destroy. Power that simply was, inevitably, undeniably. Some prisoners struggled with the transformation. The cognitive dissonance was too great. Everything they'd built their identity upon collapsed. They'd been taught that sacrifice made you strong, that deprivation built character, that Germans were superior because they could endure hardship. But in America, they discovered abundance also required discipline. Maintaining industrial production on this scale demanded organization. Ensuring everyone had access to plenty required social cooperation. Democracy at this level needed citizen responsibility. Abundance wasn't chaos, it was a different kind of order. One that produced Coca-Cola instead of conquest, ice cream instead of ideology. And slowly, painfully, these men rebuilt their understanding of the world, brick by brick, meal by meal, one Coca-Cola at a time. The letters home, censored but preserved in military archives, tell their own story. Dear Maria, you won't believe what I had today. They call it an ice cream soda. Ice cream in a glass with carbonated water and flavored syrup. I chose chocolate. I don't have words. The children would love it. Someday, perhaps when this is all over, we can have such things too. Father, I am well fed, better than I have any right to expect as a prisoner. Today we had chicken, fried crispy, with bread and butter, vegetables, and apple pie. Tomorrow is steak, they say. I think of you and Mother, and I'm ashamed to eat so well while you suffer. But I eat because refusing would change nothing, and I am learning things here, important things, about how the world could be. My dearest son, your father has returned. He is heavier than when he left, can you believe it? Healthy and strong, and he brought chocolate, real chocolate. He says in America, children eat this regularly. He cried when he gave it to you, watching you taste it for the first time. He says many things about America, strange things, but I believe him because the chocolate is real. The re-education programs that the U.S. military implemented in the camps, they were important. Taught democratic principles, exposed Nazi lies, showed films of concentration camps. But the prisoners interviewed later said the same thing over and over. The re-education programs gave them concepts, vocabulary, understanding of systems, but the food gave them belief. You could argue with lectures, dismiss films as propaganda, resist instruction. You couldn't argue with ice cream. Couldn't dismiss Coca-Cola as propaganda when it was fizzing in your hand. Couldn't resist the physical reality of abundance when you were living it, eating it, gaining weight from it. The transformation happened in their bodies before it happened in their minds. And once the body learned abundance was real, the mind had to follow. Some American guards didn't understand why they were feeding prisoners so well, resented it even. American families had rationing. American soldiers in combat zones ate K rations. Why should German prisoners eat steak and ice cream? The official answer was the Geneva Convention. International law required proper treatment of prisoners. But the deeper answer, the strategic answer, that took time to become clear. These prisoners would return to Germany, would rebuild their nation, and their experience in America would shape how they rebuilt it. Would they rebuild toward revenge, toward another round of conflict, toward resentment and militarism? Or would they rebuild toward democracy, toward cooperation, toward abundance rather than conquest? Ice cream was cheaper than another war. Coca-Cola cost less than ongoing occupation. The investment in prisoner treatment paid dividends for decades, shaped German-American relations, influenced European reconstruction, created allies from enemies, all for the cost of sugar and carbonation, chocolate and cream. The most efficient warfare is the kind that transforms enemies into friends, and apparently that transformation tastes like ice cream. By 1946, as the last prisoners prepared to return home, something remarkable had happened in many camps. Prisoners and guards had formed friendships, not universal, not everywhere, but common enough to note. They played baseball together, shared cigarettes, talked about their families, their dreams for the future. Some guards gave prisoners their addresses, said to write after the war, to stay in touch. And many did. Letters crossed the Atlantic for years afterward. Some prisoners later brought their families to America, immigrated, built new lives. The bonds formed over shared meals, over Coca-Colas and conversations. They proved stronger than wartime enmity. One guard later said in an interview, "First week, I hated them. They were Nazis, the enemy. But then you serve them breakfast every day, watch them drink coffee and joke with each other, see them show you pictures of their kids, and you realize they're just men. Men who got caught up in something terrible, but still just men. And by the end, I was hoping they'd make it home okay, hoping their families were all right. Never thought I'd feel that way about German soldiers, but there it is." The final boats leaving America in late 1946 carried prisoners back to an uncertain future. Germany was divided, occupied. Cities lay in ruins. The future was unclear. But these men carried something valuable, more valuable than their personal possessions, their letters, their memories. They carried knowledge. Knowledge that abundance was possible, that democracy could work, that enemies could become friends, that strength didn't require cruelty. They carried the taste of Coca-Cola, the memory of ice cream, the experience of being treated with dignity despite being defeated enemies. And they carried responsibility, the responsibility to build something better, to create in Germany what they had witnessed in America, to ensure their children could have chocolate without war, ice cream without conquest, abundance without someone else's deprivation. 75 years later, we can see the results. Germany is a democracy, a strong economy, a leader in the European Union, an ally of America. German children grow up with abundance. Coca-Cola and ice cream are ordinary parts of life. Chocolate is unremarkable. Sugar is taken for granted. The transformation is complete, so complete that younger Germans don't realize how extraordinary it is, how recently their grandparents and great-grandparents lived in scarcity, how different things could have been. But the story of German prisoners in American camps during World War II, it reminds us. It reminds us that the choice between vengeance and mercy matters, that how you treat defeated enemies shapes what comes next, that investment in dignity pays dividends in peace. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful weapons are not weapons at all. Sometimes the most effective warfare is generosity. Sometimes victory comes through ice cream. The legacy of this experience extends beyond German-American relations. It offers lessons for how we handle conflict, how we treat those we disagree with, how we think about strength and power. Real strength can afford to be generous. True power doesn't need to punish. Actual victory creates rather than destroys. The American guards who served ice cream to German prisoners demonstrated more strength than if they had denied food, more power than if they had inflicted suffering, more victory than if they had sought revenge. Because they didn't just defeat an enemy, they transformed an enemy into an ally. They didn't just win a war, they built a peace. And they did it, remarkably, with Coca-Cola and ice cream, with sugar and carbonation, chocolate and cream, with the simple, profound act of sharing abundance with those who had been taught to hate them. When you open a cold Coca-Cola today, when you enjoy an ice cream sundae, when you reach for a candy bar without thinking about it, remember that these simple pleasures, these ordinary luxuries, they once represented impossible dreams. They once had the power to change minds and transform worldviews. They still do in their way. Because abundance, shared generously, abundance that includes everyone, even enemies, that's a kind of power that never fades. The German prisoners who couldn't believe what American prison camps served them learned that lesson, learned it so well they carried it home and rebuilt their nation on that foundation. And we can still learn from their experience today that the choice to be generous matters, that treating others with dignity even when you don't have to, especially when you don't have to, that's real strength. That abundance shared multiplies, that prosperity isn't zero-sum, that feeding your enemy doesn't weaken you. It demonstrates the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself through cruelty. The bottles of Coca-Cola served in American prison camps are long since empty. The ice cream eaten by German prisoners has melted into memory. The chocolate bars and candy have been consumed and forgotten. But what those simple foods accomplished, that endures. A transformation of hearts and minds, a defeat of ideology through abundance, a victory won with ice cream and soft drinks. The German prisoners who couldn't believe such plenty existed became its greatest witnesses. They carried home the truth that democracy tasted like chocolate and freedom fizzed like carbonation. Their story reminds us that sometimes the greatest victories are won not through destruction, but through demonstration, not through taking, but through giving, not through hatred, but through the simple act of serving ice cream to enemies on a hot summer day. The men who experienced American abundance as prisoners became freedom's most unlikely ambassadors, transformed forever by the impossible reality of Coca-Cola and ice cream in American prison camps. And that transformation, that unlikely victory through generosity, it changed the world. So the next time someone tells you that strength requires cruelty, that victory demands vengeance, that enemies must be punished, remember the German prisoners in American camps. Remember that the strongest nation in the world chose to serve ice cream to defeated enemies, that the most powerful military in history gave Coca-Cola to prisoners for a nickel. And remember that this choice, this investment in dignity and abundance, it won a peace that has lasted 3/4 of a century. That's the real lesson, the enduring truth. Real power doesn't need to hurt. True strength can afford to heal. Actual victory builds rather than destroys. All it takes is the courage to be generous, the wisdom to share abundance, the strength to serve ice cream to enemies on a hot summer day. That's how you change the world. That's how you transform enemies into allies. That's how you win a peace that lasts. One Coca-Cola, one ice cream sundae, one chocolate bar at a time. Thanks for sticking with me through this long story. I know it's not what you might expect from a World War II narrative. No dramatic battles here, no heroic last stands. Just meals, soft drinks, desserts. But sometimes history's most important moments happen quietly, over dinner, in canteen lines, with a cold bottle on a hot day. The German prisoners who came to America expecting brutality found abundance. Expecting punishment, they found dignity. Expecting deprivation, they found ice cream. And in finding these things, they found a different future for themselves, for their families, for their nation. That's worth remembering. If you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, well, there are more stories like this. You might want to check out the video on the screen now, another story from history that might surprise you, and I'll see you there.